Welcome to Guilty Pleasure Stories channel that we hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching that. I don't even know how to start this, but here it is. My name's Luna Lucas and I'm 27 years old. I've lived in the same house my entire life, a small, quiet place that never seemed remarkable until everything I knew about it changed. I grew up in a traditional family, nothing extraordinary, just my mom, dad and me. It wasn't perfect, but it was home now. It feels like a place I barely recognize. A place I sometimes wish I could leave behind. My mum. She was the heart of everything. Her name was Scarlett Hayden. Strong, beautiful and endlessly kind. I think about her every day. Even now she was a nurse. Always putting others before herself, always smiling, even when life wasn't easy. She'd hum softly while cooking, filling the house with this warmth that made you forget any troubles you had. She was the one person I could tell anything to, the one person I trusted without question. But last year everything changed. My mom was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. We didn't even see it coming. She had always been so strong, always the one taking care of everyone else. I remember when she told me, her voice cracked just a little, but she smiled, trying to make it easier for me like she always did. She said, "We're going to get through this, Luna, together." But deep down I could tell she already knew how this was going to end. It all happened so fast, too fast. The doctors said the cancer had spread too much, that there wasn't much they could do except make her comfortable. Chemo, endless doctor's appointments, sleepless nights by her hospital bed. It's all a blur now. The house that used to feel full of life became quiet, heavy with the weight of what was happening. My dad drew. He didn't handle it well. He barely spoke, retreating into himself while I tried to hold everything together. I became my mom's caretaker, something I don't regret, but something that broke me in ways I'm still trying to understand. The last weeks were the hardest, watching her fade day by day, hearing her whisper about how proud she was of me, about how much she loved us. It was unbearable. There were nights I sat in the hallway outside her room, crying silently because I didn't want her to hear. I wanted her to think I was strong, that I could handle it, but I couldn't. When she passed away, it felt like the air was sucked out of the house. Everything stopped, the clocks ticked. But time didn't move. She was gone and I didn't know who I was without her. My dad didn't either. We were left with each other, the people who didn't really know how to talk, how to grieve together. It was like we were living in separate worlds under the same roof. But I thought maybe, just maybe, we could figure it out. Maybe we could lean on each other and find some kind of peace. I was wrong. That's when things started to shift, little moments. Things I ignored because I didn't want to see them for what they were. I thought I was just imagining it, that I was reading too much into things because of my own grief. But grief didn't explain the things he started saying, the way he started looking at me. At first it was subtle, easy to brush off, but it didn't stay that way for long. My mom was everything to me, and after she was gone I thought all I had left was my dad. I thought we'd figure out how to get through it together, but instead I found myself questioning everything I knew about the person who raised me, and that's where it started, before everything changed. Life at home had its own rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. My parents were immigrants. My mom, Scarlett, was from Ireland, and my dad, Drew, from a small town in Scotland. They met while working in a factory shortly after arriving in this country. Both of them were searching for something better, and they found it in each other. Our house was small but full of life. Mom had this way of making everything feel special. Dinner wasn't just food. It was a time to share stories, laugh, and sometimes even argue about the silliest things. She loved traditions, and she brought pieces of her homeland into every part of our lives. I can still hear her voice singing old Irish folk songs while she cooked. It was her way of keeping a part of her past alive. Dad, on the other hand, was quieter. He worked long hours as a carpenter, always coming home tired, but never too tired to check the locks on the doors or tinker with something broken around the house. He wasn't the kind of man who said "I love you" often, but he showed it in little ways, fixing my bike, bringing home my favorite snacks after work. Those were his words of affection. I was an only child, so I spent a lot of time with my parents. Mom was my world. She was the one who helped me with school projects, stayed up late talking about boys, and cheered the loudest at my soccer games. Dad was different. He was supportive, sure, but in a distant way. He wasn't someone you could pour your heart out to, and that created a bit of a gap between us. Being an immigrant family wasn't always easy. There were times when we struggled to make ends meet, and I remember watching my parents stretch every penny to make sure I had what I needed. They made sacrifices, big ones, to give me a better life. But despite the harsh **SS, Mom always found a way to keep us hopeful. She used to say hard times don't last forever. Luna, you'll see. And I believed her. Then everything changed when Mom got sick. Before that, she was the strongest person I knew. She could juggle 100 things at once and still have time to make me laugh. But cancer has a way of stealing everything. Your strength, your hope, even the light in your eyes. It took her from us slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but memories looking back. I see now that she was the glue holding us together. Without her, my dad and I were like strangers in the same house. We didn't know how to talk to each other, how to comfort each other. I thought we'd figure it out eventually, but instead things just unraveled. Before we dive deeper, I just want to say thank you for being here with me. Sharing this story isn't easy, but knowing someone out there is listening makes it a little less heavy. If you want to hear more stories like mine or join me as I try to navigate through life, feel free to stick around and follow along. After Mom passed, things changed between me and my dad, Drew. At first I thought it was just grief. We were both struggling to adjust to life without her. The house felt too quiet. Too empty. Conversations became fewer, and when they happened they felt forced, like neither of us really knew what to say. But then little things started happening. Things that didn't feel right. Drew began making comments about women we saw on TV or even in public. At first I ignored it, telling myself he was just trying to fill the silence. But the comments became more frequent, more detailed. She's got legs for days, doesn't she? He'd say while watching TV, or women these days don't leave much to the imagination. I didn't know how to respond. I'd laugh awkwardly or change the subject, hoping he'd get the hint, but he didn't. One evening we were watching a movie, a romantic comedy, something lighthearted. There was a scene where the main character shared an intimate moment, and out of nowhere, Drew said, "You think that's what women really want, a guy like that?" I froze. It wasn't just what he said. It was the way he said it, like he was trying to start a conversation I didn't want to have. "I don't know, Dad," I said, brushing it off. "It's just a movie." He nodded, but the look on his face made my stomach turn. It was like he wanted to say more, but thankfully he didn't. The next day he brought it up again, this time while we were eating dinner. "You're a woman, Luna. Don't you ever think about stuff like that? What makes a man, attractive?" I dropped my fork completely, caught off guard. My face flushed, and I mumbled something about not wanting to have that conversation with him. I thought he'd stop, but instead he laughed. "Come on, we're adults. We can talk about these things. Dad, please," I said, my voice shaky. "That's too much information." He frowned, and I could see the irritation flash in his eyes. He didn't say anything else that night, but the tension was thick. I felt like I had done something wrong by shutting him down. As the days passed, the comments didn't stop. If anything, they got worse. He'd make offhand remarks about women's bodies, about relationships, **SS, even about his own frustrations. I started avoiding him as much as I could, staying late at work or retreating to my room as soon as I got home. But no matter how much space I put between us, I couldn't shake the unease growing inside me. Then there was the day he mentioned his prostate issues. We were sitting in the kitchen and he casually brought it up, saying he was having trouble urinating. At first I thought it was just a health concern he wanted to share. But then he added, "These things happen to men when they want to have **X, but can't." My stomach churned. I wanted to scream to tell him to stop, but I didn't. I couldn't. Instead I stared at my plate, hoping he'd take the hint. He didn't. "It's natural, Luna," he said. "Everyone goes through it at some point." I nodded stiffly, my heart pounding. It wasn't natural, not this conversation, not the way he was looking at me. That night I sat in my room replaying everything in my head. I told myself I was overreacting, that he didn't mean anything by it. But deep down I knew better. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to admit it. Looking back, I wish I'd said something sooner. I wish I'd trusted my instincts. But at the time I was too scared, too confused. I told myself it was nothing, just a misunderstanding. But it wasn't, and it was only going to get worse. I didn't see it coming. Maybe I should have. Maybe there were signs I missed or things I should have questioned sooner. But when it happened, it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. It started like any other day. I'd just gotten home from work, tired, distracted, not expecting much. But as soon as I walked in, I noticed something was different. Drew. My dad was dressed up, not in his usual pajamas or the worn-out clothes he lounged in. Every day he was wearing a crisp shirt, his hair combed back, and he was cooking dinner. He smiled when he saw me, but it wasn't the kind of smile I was used to. It didn't feel right. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his voice unusually ***spur. "How was work?" I muttered something about it being fine, already feeling the unease creeping in. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way he was looking at me, like he was trying to gauge my mood, or maybe it was just my instinct. Screaming that something wasn't right, I dropped my bag by the door and joined him in the kitchen, helping with the salad like I always did. He was unusually talkative, making small talk about the weather, asking if I'd seen any good movies lately. I played along, trying to shake off the uneasiness, but then he said something that made me freeze. "You know," he began, his tone casual but deliberate. "We've been through a lot this past year, losing your mom. It's been hard on both of us." "Yeah," I said softly, not looking up from the lettuce. I was chopping, "but we've managed. Haven't we?" He continued, "We're still here, still standing. We're strong and we're smart, open-minded." I didn't like where this was going. My stomach tightened and I put the knife down, turning to look at him. "What are you trying to say, Dad?" He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I've been thinking we're both adults. We're both lonely, and until you find someone, maybe we could be there for each other." I stared at him, not understanding at first, or maybe not wanting to understand. Be there for each other. I repeated, my voice shaking. "What does that mean?" He looked away like he couldn't quite meet my eyes. "You know what I mean, Luna. We could keep each other company until you find a boyfriend." The room started spinning. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Are you serious right now?" I asked, my voice rising. "Are you out of your mind?" He stepped closer, his hands up like he was trying to calm me down. "Not like that," he said quickly, "not all the way. I just mean we could play around. Make each other feel less alone." "Stop," I snapped, stepping back. "Just stop. Do you even hear yourself? Do you know how disgusting that is?" He flinched, but then his expression hardened. "You don't understand," he said. "It's just a thought, a fleeting thought. I didn't mean anything by it. A fleeting thought," I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. "You've been thinking about this long enough to bring it up to me. Don't tell me it's fleeting." He started pacing, running his hands through his hair. "I'm lonely, Luna," he said, his voice cracking. "Your mom's gone and I don't know how to deal with it. I've got no one, and you're beautiful, you're here." It just made sense. It's not like I'd stop being your dad. I felt like I was going to throw up. "Do you even hear yourself?" I shouted. "You're supposed to protect me, to be my father, not this. I can't believe you'd even think something like this, let alone say it to me." He stopped pacing and looked at me, his face crumbling. "I didn't mean it like that," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's the devil talking, not me. I don't look at you like that. You're my daughter." "Then why the hell would you say it?" I shouted. "Why would you even let the thought cross your mind? Do you know what you've done? You've ruined everything, everything." He kept trying to justify it, blaming loneliness, grief, even a movie we'd watched months ago where a father had done something similar to his daughter. He said it had planted the idea in his head that it wasn't really him, but no matter what excuse he threw at me, I wasn't buying it. I yelled at him for hours, letting out every ounce of anger, fear, and disgust I had bottled up at some point. I told him he was sick, that he needed help. He didn't argue, he just stood there taking it, saying over and over again, you're right, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." But the words felt empty, meaningless. By the time I was done, my throat was raw, my hands were shaking, and I felt like I'd been hollowed out. He looked broken, but I didn't care. He'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and as much as he begged me to forget it, to move past it, I knew I never would. That night I locked myself in my room, pushing a chair under the doorknob because I didn't trust him anymore. I didn't trust anything anymore, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely and utterly alone. The music shifts to a low, melancholic tone as Luna's voice becomes quieter, introspective, and raw. That night I locked myself in my room. I pushed a chair under the doorknob, something I hadn't done since I was a kid, scared of the monsters I thought lived in the dark. But this time the monster wasn't imaginary. It was on the other side of the door, and it wore my father's face. I sat on my bed, my knees pulled to my ****T, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My mind was spinning, replaying his words over and over. We're adults, we're smart. We could just play around. It didn't feel real. It felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. I stared at the walls of my room, the same walls I'd grown up with, and suddenly they felt foreign, like I didn't belong here anymore. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do something, but I couldn't. I felt frozen, stuck in this suffocating silence. Every sound in the house made my heart race, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the fridge. It all made me jump. I didn't trust him anymore. I didn't trust anything anymore. At some point I picked up my phone, my hands shaking. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but who? My mom was gone. My friends had drifted away after she passed, and my dad, the one person I should have been able to turn to, was the reason I felt this way. I had no one. But then I did something. I still can't fully explain. I called him my dad. He was just down the hall, but I called him anyway. I needed answers, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear them. He answered on the first ring, Luna. He said, his voice cautious, almost timid. I didn't say anything at first, trying to find the words. Finally I managed. Why, Dad, why would you say something like that to me? And there was a long pause. And for a moment I thought he might hang up. But then he sighed. I don't know, he said, his voice heavy. I wasn't thinking. I've been so lonely. And it just came out. That's not an excuse. I snapped, my voice shaking. You don't just say something like that, not to your daughter. Do you even realize how messed up that is? I know, he said quickly. I know, Luna, and I'm sorry I wasn't myself. It's not me. It's the things I've been exposed to, the things I've been watching. What are you talking about? I asked, my stomach twisting. He hesitated, then said, porn, it's everywhere these days. It's so easy to get caught up in it. I know it's wrong, but it's like it's messing with my head, making me think things I wouldn't normally think. I felt sick. Are you seriously blaming porn for this? I asked. Do you hear how ridiculous that sounds? I'm not blaming it, he said. Defensively, I'm just saying it's part of the problem. It's not me. Luna. It's not who I am. I've been struggling and I don't know how to deal with it. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hang up, to shut him out completely. But another part of me, the part that still saw him as my dad, wanted to believe him, wanted to believe he wasn't this person. He was showing me. But how could I? How could I believe anything? He said after what he'd done. I can't do this. I said. Finally, my voice breaking. I can't live like this, Dad. I can't look at you the same way anymore. Luna, please. He said, his voice desperate. I'll get help. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Just don't give up on me. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I ended the call and threw my phone onto the bed, burying my face in my hands. The tears finally came, hot and relentless, as the weight of everything crashed down on me. How did it come to this? How did the man who was supposed to protect me, to guide me, become the person I feared most? I felt trapped in this house, in this life, with no way out. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, and the worst part, I still needed him as much as I hated him in that moment. I still depended on him for shelter, for stability, for the little bit of family I had left. And that realization was almost as painful as what he'd done. I wish I could tell you that things got better after that, that I found the strength to walk away and never look back. But the truth is, it only got harder. I wish I had all the answers. I wish I could sit here and tell you exactly what to do if you've ever found yourself in a situation like this. But the truth is, I'm still figuring it out. I'm still trying to piece together what's next for me, and honestly, it's terrifying. 4 days after that night, I barely left my room. Every time I heard my dad's footsteps, I froze. I kept playing his words over and over in my head, trying to make sense of them, trying to understand how someone who raised me could do this. But no matter how much I replayed it, there was no explanation that could make it okay. I knew I couldn't stay here, not like this. So I started making a plan. It wasn't easy, and it's still not. But I knew I couldn't let this define me. I couldn't let it break me. The first step was reaching out for help, even though it felt impossible. I contacted a therapist, someone who could guide me through the mess in my head and help me figure out what to do next. It was hard admitting I couldn't do this alone, but it was the best decision I've made. Next, I started looking for a way out of this house. It's not going to happen overnight, and I know that I've got to save up, figure out where to go and how to move my things without causing a scene. It's overwhelming, and some days it feels like too much, but I'm taking it one step at a time. That's all I can do. And what I've realized through all of this is that we don't have to have it all figured out. It's okay to feel lost, scared, and unsure. What matters is that we keep moving forward, even if it's just one small step at a time. That's what I'm trying to do. Find my strength, set my boundaries, and take back control of my life. If you're watching this, and you're going through something similar, I want you to know that you're not alone. It's easy to feel trapped, to think there's no way out, but there is. It might not be quick. It might not be easy, but there's always a way forward. You deserve safety, peace, and the chance to heal. And if my story can help even one person realize that, then sharing it is worth it. Thank you for listening, for being here. Sharing this hasn't been easy, but knowing that someone out there might find strength in my words makes it a little less heavy. That if you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thanks for listening.